All right, today we're talking about how to become a business owner, even if you are in the middle of your life, if you got a mortgage to pay, if you got kids you got to pay for, and specifically how to finance a business acquisition. My guest today is Jeremy Ames. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and every week we have smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. And if you check out the archives, we've got Netflix and Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, lots of great episodes for you to check out. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, where we help businesses to give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you to run your podcast and content marketing. You're the easy button for any company to launch, run a podcast. We do strategy, accountability, and full execution. And we've also built the Podcast Copilot platform, which is being called the Wix or Squarespace of B2B podcasting. So to learn all about it, you can go to our website, rise25.com, or email our team at support@rise25.com. All right. And I want to give a shout out first to David Nilsson, who's a friend of the podcast, who is business partners with today's guest. His name is Jeremy Ames, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Guidant Financial, which is a nationwide leader in small business and franchise financing going back to 2003. Started it with 10 grand and a laptop and transformed into a startup that has been a financing powerhouse. They've helped over 30,000 different businesses, and he's a serial entrepreneur, started a bunch of different companies. So we're going to talk about those different businesses here. And he hails from beautiful Idaho, which I was just in Idaho recently. Actually, for the last 2 summers, I've been in Idaho. Went to McCall, Idaho last summer. It's such a beautiful part of the country. And Jeremy, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. Let's start with your background, your story. We were chatting beforehand, and you said that you weren't raised with a lot of money, didn't have a lot of money as a kid, and actually moved around from different schools. And I had a similar experience where my family moved around the country a number of different times. Let's talk a little bit about how that shaped you, how that made who you are today. Because I think that's, for me personally, one of the most foundational things is moving around to different schools. It definitely shapes who you are as an adult.
Yeah, my wife makes fun of me because the few times that we go to the movie theater, I insist that we buy snacks at the theater, even though they're like $6 for a box of air. Because I have trauma that came from being in a movie theater and hearing a soda can go off. Because my mom, anytime we ever got the rare chance to go to the movie theater, we have to stop at 7-Eleven, pick up anything that we were going to have in there. And I just knew that soda can popping in the middle of the theater was like a big sign saying, hey, the poor kid's sitting in row 3. So I think the way that it shaped me is just, I was always willing to work hard enough so that I wouldn't have to worry about whether I could afford to go to dinner, or whether I could afford to go to the movies, or whether I could afford to buy my kids a pair of jeans that they want. And I think that's part of what I think led me to entrepreneurship, even though I really didn't have anyone growing up as a role model to even think that that was a possibility.
That's I hear that frequently from guests on this show that there's kind of like 2 different categories: people that are hustling, selling stuff on their street at age 6, and then other people who maybe didn't have an example of that, so they didn't even consider it until maybe later in life. And you were 25 when you decided to start a company. I understand it came from a bad management situation. Tell us that story.
So I dropped out of college twice. And when I dropped out of college, I ended up getting a job at a restaurant. And I started as a busboy and really quickly worked up to being a server, and then doing cocktail shifts, and then bartending, and then supervising, and then managing.
Which, by the way, I waited tables in college. Yeah. Also, the best experience at all. Everyone should wait tables at some point in their life.
First of all, it's super fun when you're in your, late teens, early 20s to work with all the people that age.
Yeah.
But also it just makes you into a better human, I think, having to deal with so many different people.
Absolutely.
Do you still wake up with recurring dreams where you can never fast enough get to all the things that you need to get to?
I swear my brain still thinks of it because you learn your brain like cycles through all your tables and you're thinking ketchup on this table, Diet Coke on this table, and they needed an extra setup on this table. And my brain still like functions like that sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So before I knew it, I was moving around the country opening new restaurants as part of opening management team. And I got lonely and I decided I wanted to move back home to Seattle. That's where I grew up, at least most of the years, formative years for me. And so I took a job to go be a manager at this restaurant in Bellevue, Washington. And I got there and I was fired up. All these new ideas of things I wanted to put in place, and I'm just kicking ass. And about 3 months in, the assistant general manager says, "Hey, Jeremy, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she pulls me up to this, we had this bar that was upstairs in the restaurant. She took me up there and she sat me down and she said, "Jeremy, I know you have a lot of energy for this stuff and you're trying to do all these things, and it just makes it seem like you're trying to make everybody look bad." And she said a whole bunch of other stuff. At that point, I didn't hear anything. And I'm crying in the middle of this restaurant, John. I'm like a 23 or 24-year-old guy in the middle of this restaurant that I manage at. And I am just in tears, feeling so, I don't know, violated or so small. It just felt like it sucked all the initiative out of my world. And I ended up putting in my 2 weeks. I don't know, it was a week or two later. And I decided, well, when I had been in Boise, Idaho originally, because I had dropped out of college the first time here, I had bought a house and I only lived here long enough before I moved out that I had to rent it. I couldn't afford to sell it. And so at that point, for 3 years had this rental home. So I thought, I'm kind of this real estate investor. Maybe I should do more with this real estate thing. And my dad had recently gotten his real estate license and was doing some mortgages stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll get that and I'll start to think about, how I could deal with real estate. And it ended up leading to the first business that I started. I think within 4 months, I met some people that were doing some interesting things on the investment side. And I thought to myself, when you go through training for real estate, the one thing they're adamant to tell you about is they say, do not work with investors, because all they'll do is suck you for information and time, and then they'll never do any business with you. They'll go do it with somebody else. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, well, but what about the people that want to be real estate investors but don't know how? They're not going to suck you for information. That they need someone to help them do it. And so this idea was forming in my head, but I found out that you had to have your license for 2 years before you could become a broker. So I was like, well, I guess that idea doesn't work. And then I was back in Boise for a weekend to visit my buddy, and I ran into my ex-girlfriend. We started talking for a while, and she'd been in real estate for a couple of years. And next thing I know, she's moving out to Seattle, Washington. She's helping me set up this brokerage, and now we've been married for 21 years. So it turned out all right.
Yeah, I guess so. And so that's the first business, then the real estate business. How does that lead into Guidant, or does it evolve into Guidant?
Yeah, it's all connected, man. So I have this real estate company, and we're working with various investors and networks and stuff. And one of the guys I knew said, "Hey, you ought to meet this guy I know, David. You guys are about the same age. You both like Michael Jackson music. I think you'd really hit it off." And so I went and met David, and we did. We liked each other. We had fun.
And I don't know how tall you are. David is extremely tall, so that'd be a little.
They call me the wee one. I'm only about 6'2", 190. So
okay, so you're still pretty
guy.
tall. Okay, so at least you're not like looking up at him. I think he's like 6'4" or something like that.
Yeah, he used to be 6'5", but I think he's shrinking as he's getting older.
Yeah.
So anyway, I meet David, we hit it off, and we decide we're going to do some investment projects together. And so we did a fix and flip, and we did another sort of rental thing. And then, David had been doing some land development, and he had this project that he had secured over on the peninsula by the naval base. And he said, "Hey, you want to partner on this?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And the whole strategy was, let's take this plot of land, let's subdivide it into smaller plats. And then we had a buddy who had a mobile home dealer's license. And so the strategy was put down the concrete foundation, strap a mobile home to the concrete foundation. And when you do that, you can remove off title that it's a mobile home. And now all of a sudden you can get traditional financing. And so that was the shtick, right? As like you can take this less expensive home that can go up pretty quickly and you can turn it into something where you can get typical, Freddie Mac financing. And so we go and meet with these attorneys to set up the entities for our fundraising efforts. And they said, hey, have you thought about using self-directed IRAs? And we said, what are you talking about?
Hmm.
Which was interesting because we were connected in all the local investment communities. And this wasn't something anybody was talking about. And so we came to learn that at that time, it was almost 30 years since ERISA was passed, that you could use retirement funds to invest in all these alternative assets, including real estate, if you had the right custodian and the right person to help you do it. And so we went back out to our network to do fundraising for this project. And we said, hey, by the way, if you want to use retirement funds, we know how to use these self-directed IRAs, and you can bring your retirement funds in and invest in it. And about 2/3 of the funding commitments we got were from people who wanted to use retirement funds. And so then we had to scramble and figure out, how do we actually do this?
Mm-hmm.
So we went back to these attorneys and we worked with them to put it together. And I think we walked away with two big learnings from that project. One was nobody knew about this at the time. No one was talking about it. And people were super interested when they learned about it. And number two was it was really confusing to figure out what to do. Like you'd call the same custodian and you'd get two different answers on two different days. And we just thought there has to be a better way. At the time, the only people that were really helping people with this were bank custodians and attorneys. And you're a recovering attorney. So those are two people that don't speak English.
No,
At least
they don't.
Not in a way that's helpful for your average investor
Right,
who's trying
right.
to accomplish a particular goal.
Right, right. So you explain this, and at what point did you decide that, well, actually, the business is not so much like the real estate projects, but actually creating a model around this and helping more
Exactly.
people? What point did you have that light bulb moment?
Well, that was one of four companies David and I started at that point in time. So let's
All right,
not
what was the
let's not
worst?
overblow that we had this perfect crystal ball like this was going to be the thing, but it was one we were excited about. And so we said, hey, we think there's a market here. And we had this idea of, hey, we're going to go to all the local mortgage brokerages and all the local real estate brokerages, and we're just going to get their top people and we're going to get access to their clients because our hypothesis is that their clients don't know that they can use this. And so we started the company and we worked with these attorneys to build out what we thought was a much simpler way to approach it to help investors understand what they could do and get these accounts set up. And we went out to these mortgage brokers and real estate brokers and we did a lot of classes and we got very little business because it turns out the people who were the best at these particular places didn't want anything to do with us. They were too busy making money. It was all the people that wanted to spend time with us were the people who didn't have clients. They're like, this is super interesting. Maybe this will help me get clients.
Yeah. Yep.
And it wasn't, we didn't have this magical business breakthrough until we had a buddy who was a CTO at a local company. And we're talking to him one day and he said, hey, you guys should advertise on Google. And we said, Google the search engine? And he's like, yeah. And so he starts talking to us about pay-per-click advertising, which
And this was this maybe 2004, 2005
this
time
was
frame?
early 2003, man.
2003. Okay, very early. Yeah.
So in 2003, he's talking to us about Google pay-per-click advertising. I've looked it up since. And at the time, they were doing $1 billion in revenue, which sounds
Which is nothing.
huge, but now they're like 100 billion, right? So it was
Yeah.
just a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And I remember talking to him, and for me, the light bulb went on when he said, and you can set a budget for the day. And I said, oh, yeah, but what's the minimum you got to invest? He's like, I don't know. You can probably do like 10 or 15 bucks a day.
Mhm.
And I said, this is genius.
Yeah.
Turns out that's right in my budget.
Yeah.
And so we started advertising on Google pay-per-click. And at the time, we were getting clicks for 10 cents or 50 cents. I mean, some of those today are going for $35 or $40.
Yeah.
But all of the sudden, this really niche business idea that we had, we could go find these needles in a haystack. This person that's in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, that wants to invest their retirement funds to do this thing other than buy stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And that was really when Guidant started to take off. Within 45 days, we, hired our first salesperson because we just could not keep up with the volume
Wow.
of leads that were coming in. Even at $20 a day was our budget
Wow.
for leads when we started.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So kind of combination of a solution that hadn't, a need in a market, right? There's people that had retirement funds, wanted to invest them in alternative assets. And then you had a solution that wasn't widely spread, that wasn't explained. There weren't a lot of other competitors out there that were doing this. And then you have this tool that produced traffic to your website, got exposure, got your message out there, Google pay-per-click advertising. So kind of like three big things that made it successful from early on.
Yeah, and the thing I like to point out about the experience with Google is that anytime someone's looking for a business, you're looking for the rising tide that's out there. I know lots of other people. I'm part of the entrepreneurs organization, and I've got lots of other friends who had businesses that started at the same time that were sort of really unique. Maybe they're a retail. I have a buddy who had a niche high-end fly fishing shop that became the largest online retailer of fly fishing gear before he sold it in like 2013 or whatever. And
Hmm.
it was all about that moment in time with this new tool coming online that was changing how people could reach out to and connect with customers.
Yeah.
It was game
Yeah.
changing.
And maybe it was also A River Runs Through It came out too, and that got a lot of people interested in it, maybe
Absolutely.
possibly
He
too.
credits that movie.
Yeah.
He
Yeah. A
says
lot
that
of people
movie
are
at that
interested in
point
fly
in time
fishing.
blew it up. All of a sudden, because
Yeah.
he was in Silicon Valley, he said in Silicon Valley, every billionaire and every aspiring entrepreneur
Yeah.
wanted to be a fly fisherman.
But it's so true. If you are part of a wave that is increasing, it makes it so much easier than being in an industry that's, contracting.
Yep.
Which frankly, to me, I mean that's how I felt about my previous profession, which is practicing law. I knew like when the Alexa devices started coming out or Siri, that eventually it's going to be at this point where you're going to say like draft me an NDA, and now those technologies are kind of converging, and that people will start using those things instead of lawyers. All right, so Guidant. So that's the origin story behind it. And then you and David have started other companies together. We'll get to Doxa, but you mentioned a couple of other companies early on. Any kind of like sore, still a little painful stories around companies that you started that I know there's one in
I'll tell you the most
2007.
painful one
Okay.
because I'm not somebody who finished college, but I like to tell people I still spent $500,000 on my education. And that education was called New Wire Investor. So we had been running Guidance since 2003 and it was growing like crazy, right? We were on the Inc. 500 list a couple of years in a row. Things were going well. It was growing like a bug. But the problem we kept running into was that for people who didn't know yet what they wanted to invest in, trying to find the options out there was just really confusing. And at the time, there were all sorts of models. I don't know if you remember these, but like Daily Candy had a newsletter, and there were a couple others like that where they had these huge audiences of people that they're delivering this information to. And so my thought was, we need that for alternative investments so people can understand what are all the options of things that are out there other than just stocks, bonds, and mutual funds that you can invest in. And so I started crafting this idea and building this team, and we got an amazing CIO who came on board. We had this team of writers. We built out this cool website, and then we launched this thing, and then realized, oh shoot, like Google's not picking us up because we've got the subscription model. So then we pulled the subscription model down, and we started expanding the content. We were starting to get some eyeballs, but we still weren't clear how we were going to make money.
Hmm.
And, eventually we stripped this thing down and ran it pretty lean for a while, and it just sort of eked out an existence. And we sold it for, maybe 25% of what we had invested into it. And for me, the big realization is that you remember that movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, with business, it's bullshit. You don't build it and
And
they
they
come.
come. Yeah,
That's not
right.
how it works.
Right. Right. Yeah.
If you don't know who your customer is, then it's very likely that you're building the wrong thing, right?
Hmm.
To help them solve whatever problem you think you want them to solve. Now, if I could go back in time and take off this hubris that I had built because I had one company that started to really pan out and now I thought I was this business genius, the insight I have now, I would have been, oh, why don't I just start a newsletter that doesn't cost anything? Start delivering some things, see if I can grow some eyeballs of people that are interested in this. To me, one of the big lessons that I've taken away from that is that so often we think when we have this idea of something we want to do that we've got to go out and get $250,000 and build all this stuff out rather than take a step back and go, like, what are the one or two assumptions that this idea relies on and how do I go test them? And if
Right.
you have time, I've got one or two cool client stories of people who I think did this really well that I'm
Yeah,
happy.
let's hear them. Let's hear them.
Okay, so one of my favorite clients is Spiro Egdos. It was a guy who worked for IBM for a long time. And he just got tired of the constant travel. He had kids that were growing up and he was missing. He wasn't making it to baseball games or, Girl Scout meetings. And he said, this is enough. I'm going to start a business. But he didn't know what he wanted to do. And so he's looking around at all these different options, franchise options, startup options, acquisition options. And one day while he's in the middle of his search, his wife says, honey, you have got to go clean the garbage bins. So have you ever cleaned your garbage bins, John?
Uh, Probably, but not eagerly.
Yeah. So if you go out
Yeah.
and look at them, my guess is they're pretty nasty on the
Yeah.
inside,
Yeah.
right? And Spiros were nasty like this. And there's no way, he told me, he said, there's no way I was doing cleaning this garbage bin. So he gets online and starts searching around. Somebody has to
Garbage
have come up with a
bin
solution
cleaning
for this
company.
thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And he finds this guy in Southern Florida that has what amounts to a truck that he has modified to be like a mobile car wash for garbage
Garbage
bins.
bins.
And so he
Okay.
calls this guy and he says, hey, can you come out and do my spot? And he says, no, I'm not going to drive 90 minutes to do a $15 service for your garbage bins. But he talks to him for a few minutes at the end. He says, but if you want to buy a truck, I'm happy to sell you a truck.
Hmm.
Spiro gets off the phone with him and he's stewing on this. He's like, is there an opportunity there?
Hmm.
It's like $100,000 for this modified truck. It
Wow.
is no joke.
Wow.
So after thinking about it for a couple of days, Spiro channels his inner Girl Scout dad and he goes to the grocery store with a clipboard. And when people are coming out of the grocery store, he just starts talking to them. He's telling them about the service, asking them if it's something they might be interested in.
Wow.
And then he made this offer to him. Hey, if you want to cut me a check for your first 3 months, I'll give you this discount. If I end up moving forward and buying the truck, then you'll get your first, 3 months for this and we'll go from there. If not, I'll send you back your check and, thank you for supporting me. He got 60 people to sign up that day.
Wow. Wow.
And so then that was enough validation for him to go, okay, that tells me there's a market here. I'm going to go out and invest in this first truck. Well, now he's got 3 trucks and he services something like 10,000 garbage bins. He has an entire city that he signed up because he figured out that there was one city who had a green initiative. And so he sold them on the idea of this machine because it does it in a green way as opposed to what people normally do, which is dump it down their gutters.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Which in that particular area of Florida means it actually goes into the water system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's the genius part. The city told him that all of the bids that they get for city services, they have to get from 3 different providers. So what he did is he went to the 3 people that were submitting bids for the waste management contract for the city, and he inked partnership deals with them to be a part of their
Be a provider for them.
be a part of their contract.
So he'd
that they
get the
submitted
business
to
no
the
matter
city.
what.
So it didn't
Smart.
matter. It didn't matter who won the contract. And he picked up something like 7,000 accounts on that one deal.
Amazing. So where did Guidant help with the acquisition of the truck, the $100,000 truck?
Yeah. So what we did was we helped him roll his retirement funds. He invested that to start the business, and he used the proceeds to buy the first truck and some other things for his company.
That lesson of him going outside the grocery store, there's so many people that would stop right there and wouldn't do it, wouldn't have the courage, or they'd show up to the grocery store and be like, I can't do it, but the courage to do that is phenomenal, because that saved him, $100,000, expensive lesson if there wasn't a market for it.
Yeah. And, I'm telling you a story of something that worked out, but I can tell you a story of one that didn't.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I had this idea, this epiphany at one point. I went on this trip to India. I actually went to an entrepreneurs organization university out there. And I had an EO friend that was from India, and we went and stayed with his family for a week. And he took me around to meet a lot of business owners. And one of the things in this area of India is they have a really robust sort of textile manufacturing business. And so I got to go tour the Robert Graham shirt shop and all these other things that they had out there. And I was just fascinated. I suddenly had this idea. I was like, okay, what if you could build a website tool? Because my hypothesis was there are so many people out there that would love to be a fashion designer. But when you think about the logistics of managing inventory, building the pipeline to produce this stuff and then ship it from overseas and then distribute it to customers, it's just unrealistic. But what if I could build a digital site that allows people to digitally develop something, and then that design could go off to this offshore production firm that could then print the fabric and do all these things. So I decided the way I was going to test this was I would test this concept for shirts, because at the time I was in love with those shirts, where you flip the cuffs inside out and they got some cool other design on it and makes it look like
those are cool.
You're really hip.
Yeah.
So I had this idea. So I created some digital designs and I tested, like building 10 shirts for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I walked away from that experience with 10 amazing shirts and the realization that this business model was not going to work with current technology unless I was willing to invest the next 10 years of my life to figure out an entire new industry that I didn't know at all. Because
Mm,
up to that point, every other business I had started was a services based business. This was
mm.
totally different. This was a combination of technology business with a logistics and manufacturing
Yeah, there's
business.
multiple different pain points and challenges and industries you have to figure out through that. Yeah.
But I learned that. I learned what it was going to cost me to ship things overseas. I learned what it was
Oh.
going to cost to print a piece of custom fabric with this design that you created. Like I have these shirts that have, pictures of my kids on them.
Hmm. That's cool. I want to ask you about the kind of another pivot point with Guidant because I know in your origin story, so you guys originally were in Seattle,
Yep.
Seattle, very high cost of living coastal city, and you ran into a problem with hiring, getting good people to come work for you. And one of the epiphanies was leveraging remote talent from all over the globe, which actually led to the next company, Doxa. So tell us a bit about that part of the story.
John, I remember the moment that everything shifted for me. So every month as part of being in the entrepreneur organization, I meet with, 7 to 9 other entrepreneurs in non-competitive industries. And so I remember I'm at one of these meetings and we're doing this roundtable about the biggest challenges we're having in our business right now. And we're going around the circle. And 8 out of 9 of the people are talking about recruiting and retention. And all of a sudden, this pain that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years in our business, I'm thinking, oh, this isn't just an us pain. This is what's going on in our market. It is
Mm.
getting harder and harder to recruit and retain really great people because of the dynamics of cost of living and the certain types of talent that were in the area and these other huge companies like Amazon and Microsoft that were sucking up every
A lot of
human they
competition.
could
Yeah,
and
yeah.
paying them massive amounts of money. And so we ended up pursuing a three-pronged approach for how we were going to deal with that. One is we built our own offshore development team. Second was we partnered with an offshore company because a lot of what we do, like the bane of our existence, is that we're chasing small business owners for information.
Mm.
And guess what small business owners suck at and hate? Like
Providing
collecting
information.
data, doing
Yeah,
paperwork. Like
yeah.
I've still never met a business owner that says, I can't wait to start a business because I love paperwork, John. I can't wait to dig in and do
Yeah,
some more of it.
yeah.
And so we're constantly chasing people for information and then we're getting the wrong stuff and having to communicate that. So we had this thought, okay, what if we could train an offshore team to translate what clients are sending us, route it to the right place, and then push it back? If we could do that, and we could do that at this sort of cost basis, that would allow us then to ramp up in these other parts within the US. And so we saw it as an amplification strategy for what we were doing stateside. And so we partnered with this other company there. It's also what led to me going to Boise, but we can talk about that later if you want. And we worked with this offshore company for about 4 years, and it was going poorly. We had a lot of turnover. It didn't feel like the people were really integrated into our culture. And the challenge with our business is I can't find someone off the street that can walk in day one and start working here.
Mm.
Like what we do is too niche and too unique. I can't even hire people who have done 401k administration before and just plunk them in and expect that they can start doing it on day one. They almost have to relearn some ways to do things because what our clients need is so different. So for us, what really matters is we have to have people get part of our culture. They have to become ingrained in how we think and how we work and stick around for a while because we have to invest so much time and effort and energy to get them up to speed. So it wasn't working for us. And we were literally at the point where we were considering shutting it down. We actually had a proposal to just shut it down and, try something different. And David came back from an EO event and he said, hey, Jeremy, I met this woman that has set up BPOs for EO and for McKinsey.
Mm.
What if we started our own business and just did this for ourselves? And I
Mm.
thought about it for a minute and I said, well, we cannot be the only ones that are struggling with this particular problem. So we said, let's try it. And so we started with Guidant as the first customer to try and really figure this out. Because one of our hypotheses was that experience we were having, like we could do better. We could find more engaged people. We could pay them more. We could create better infrastructure for them. We could create a better culture that was going to feel like a win-win.
Hmm.
And we really sort of proved that out on Guidant as the first customer, and then raised some money and recruited a team to build that business out. And, David has since left many years ago to go run that because it's growing like gangbusters. In fact, they recently just started franchising.
Wow, that's exciting. How do you see, with AI, the role of AI, like how do you see that plugging into what you do?
Yeah.
What Doxa does?
To me, AI is no different than the conversation about offshoring or having global talent. Is if you're looking at it as just a replacement for what you're trying to do today, you're going to miss the opportunity that's there. A business is all about growing. And yes, you want to have efficiency, but efficiency today is fine. But if you don't reinvest those dollars into creating more value for your customers, your business isn't going to be around long enough.
Hmm.
And so when we looked to leverage global talent, we thought this is going to give us an opportunity to actually up-level our US team, to pay people more, to give them more challenging roles, to hire talented people. And it for sure was that. I think AI is going to be the same thing. But the same thing I keep telling my team, if you're not experimenting with it on a daily basis to help you figure out how you're working in your job, like you are going to be the people that become expendable in the market. And
Left
so
behind, yeah.
for me as a CEO, it's really important that I figure out how to get as many of our team members to embrace it, not just for the value of the business, but for their value as individuals. Because the people who can learn how to leverage AI, how to take their unique, creative human ability to put things together and discern what makes sense for the particular customer or situation that they're trying to resolve, those people are going to become superpowered.
That's right. Yeah.
And the people who don't know how to do it are going to be like my dad, who, when I used to come home from high school, there'd be a post-it note on the VCR that said, "Hey, could you hit record for the
8
Yankees
p.m.
game at 4:10 p.m.?"
Right.
And who still has to call my baby sister when he needs to do any updates to his phone. I
Yeah,
mean,
right. That's funny. Yeah, actually this summer I wanted to teach my kids a bit about everything that's happening in AI, and so I created a chat bot project in ChatGPT, which we called Summer, where I uploaded. We had this trip that we planned, and we were staying in multiple different locations, and usually it's, Dad, where are we going? Where are we staying next? Does it have a hot tub? What's the gate code? All these types of things. I was like, I don't want to deal with that. So I took all the instructions for the houses the Airbnbs were staying in, and I uploaded it. And then we could ask Summer all these questions all the time. And it was everything from what's the door code, what's the address of where we're staying, to is there a coffee shop nearby, to what's the best bike ride to do when we're in Coeur d'Alene, all those sorts of things. And it was really cool and fun and exciting to experiment with that with my kids. Of course, now the kids are going to be like, this is just expected to them, like just normal to them. But it was a little bit of an epiphany, like, wow, this is really cool, at least at the beginning.
I love that. And I want to tell a story of my own because I was talking with my son one day. He was talking to me about this thing he was struggling with a project. And I said, "Hey, have you, used ChatGPT to do this and this and this thing?" And he said, "My teachers say I'm not allowed to use ChatGPT."
Oof.
And I said, "Will, let me help you understand, dude. Your teachers don't see what's going to happen in the future, but this is how things are going to get done. So you've got to learn this. I mean, don't use it to write your paper,
Yeah.
but think about it this way. It's like if you want anybody to give you cover at school, as long as you're not using it to write your stuff, but you're using it to edit things, you're using it to ask questions and help you think through stuff and help you clarify things." Said that's awesome. And so last year for his personal project, he decided that he wanted to develop this card game that he and I had come up with on one of our trips together. We had been
Hmm.
playing this football card game, and my son was a competitive Pokemon player. He actually went to the Pokemon World Championships a couple of years ago.
Cool.
And so he had this idea for, I want to create a card game that's a trading card game like Pokemon, but with these cool sort of football characteristics. He calls it for sports dweebs, like people who are kind of nerdy, but also like sports. And so he built out a mock for this game for his personal project in school. And as summer was coming up, Jill and I were talking with him about what he's going to do. And we were big fans, like, "Well, you should get a job. You haven't had a job. It's about time to have that experience." And he said, "Dad, but what I really want to do is I want to see if I can turn my game into a business. And I was like, oh, this kid knows how to manipulate me, right? I'm the guy who works all day, every day, talking about small business ownership and empowerment.
Yeah.
That's the right button to push. And so I said, okay,
Yeah.
I'll make you a deal. If you are willing to commit a minimum of 12 hours a week to this project, including an hour that you're going to meet with me every Sunday, we're going to sit down and we're going to use it as an accountability sorts coaching thing. We're going to talk about what progress you made, what your plan is for the week, what your long-term goals are. Um, and he said, yeah, let's do it. And it, John, has been so fun. I'm not sure this thing's ever going to go anywhere.
And did you develop it in ChatGPT or Lovable, or what did you do?
He has used a lot of Chat GPT, both to develop images of these cards and players
Okay.
that he has
Uh-huh.
concepts for. But I've also really been pushing him to use it to help him clarify his thoughts, use it as a strategic partner.
Yeah,
Like,
thought
just
partner, right?
get
Yeah,
random things
yeah,
on and say, hey, I
yeah.
want you to put the perspective of somebody who's a game designer and help me pick this apart. So it's been a really awesome learning opportunity to help him think about how he would do that. Okay, so you need to start developing eyeballs on this game and people who can help you test it.
Yeah.
Okay, now go use ChatGPT as a thought partner and start to come up with what your plan would be. What's your hypothesis? And so right now he's got a plan. There's this board game show that's happening in Idaho here in a couple months, and he's queuing up to have printed cards that he can bring there and
Wow,
people
cool.
test, and it's all building up towards this big thing in Salt Lake. But we'll
Oh
see.
man.
We'll see
Oh
where it
man,
goes.
that is
Regardless, what a cool learning opportunity it's been to just be a part of having those conversations with him.
absolutely. I think a lot about that for kids. I got four kids, and their oldest is 14, youngest is 6. And I think about like this world they're going into, and like how do we prepare them for it? I don't know, but I don't feel that the education that they're getting right now is really preparing them for it. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what they should be doing, but it just seems like the way that we're teaching our kids is not really preparing them for it. And I totally agree that they need to be playing around with these tools and learning them so that they are ready for whatever comes next.
And it's the only way to learn. In fact, we talk a lot about it is with our leadership team about how to think about AI internally. And I think my observation is it's not like we can build some course that's going to magically solve this for our team because the minute you build that course 3 months from now,
Out of
it's
date.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
The only way that this works is if we're creating space for people to actually experiment with using it to try and solve problems. That's
Yeah.
how they're going to learn because it's not necessarily about what the technology does today. It's how to start to think differently in the same way that you remember when Google first came out,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were all really bad at searching for the things that we wanted.
Yeah.
And now, even my kids will be like, oh, I can't find that. And I'll be like, okay. And I'll do my own sort of Google thing and it'll pop right up. And they'll be like, how
Yeah.
did you do that? I've
Yeah.
been searching on Google for more than 20 years. Like that,
Yeah.
my brain just thinks through what's the right thing to type in here that's going to help me get the outcome that I'm looking for. And I think the same thing is going to be true of AI.
In so many different ways. Yeah, for sure. Jeremy, this has been so much fun talking to you. I know we're almost out of time here, and I didn't prepare you for my last question because I'm a little rusty because I didn't do a lot of interviews over the summer. So that's my excuse, but I'm going to ask it to you anyways, but I think you'll be fine. I'm a big fan of gratitude. A big
Okay.
fan of expressing gratitude and taking the time to acknowledge people that have had a big impact on our lives and our careers, especially people that are still a part of our life. So less so our third grade teacher, more so someone who's still in our life, key clients, investors, business partners, that sort of thing. Is there anyone that you would want to acknowledge? Any peer, contemporary, business partner, investor,
Oh man,
friend,
this feels
forum
like
mate?
stepping up to the Oscars. So let me start with my wife, John.
Of course.
Um, when I started my first business, I had nothing, and there's something about when you connect with someone that loves you before you have anything that gives you a certain amount of safety. Like, I don't think any of it's possible without having that support. I think about how much energy is required to get a business up and off the ground. And I am so grateful that I wasn't having to spend that time and effort and energy um, trying to keep a relationship on the rails because my
Mm.
wife is just so easy to get along with and be with.
Mm.
And I would say the same thing about my business partner. Even when we are not on the same page about how we think about getting somewhere, we call it violent agreement. I always know we want the same things and we share the same values. And so it's just a question of beating it up until we get to the right answer to move forward. So I'm super grateful for that. And, I've had maybe 4 or 5 different business coaches over the years for different points when I needed different things. So I remember, in 2008, right after my son was born, the IRS came out with this memorandum that created some confusion and some concern around some of what we were doing on the self-directed side. And I remember at the time feeling almost paralyzed because I also was knee deep in a bunch of real estate investments that were all going sideways. And so the fear was just overwhelming me. And I remember I went to this event and I saw this guy, Mark Moses, speak, and he was all about think big, be big, punch brick walls. And I thought to myself, that's
CEO
what
Coaching International. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
CEO
Yeah.
Coaching International
Yeah.
now, but this
Yeah.
even predates
Before
that.
it. Okay.
And so I remember thinking, this is what I need. This is the balance I need in my world right now. And so for a year, we worked with Mark and he helped us sort of punch our way through the fear and get out to the other side. And at another point in time, I had another coach that's well known in EO, Warren Rustand,
Oh,
who was
Warren's
the first
amazing.
person who convinced me, Jeremy, you need an executive assistant. You're trying to do all these things. And let me tell you, you're doing a lot of them poorly. I think the thing he really opened my eyes to is I had this really strong independent streak from when I was really, really young. And so I was really bad at asking people for help. And he says to me one day, he says, Jeremy, how do you feel when someone asks you for help? And I said, well, I feel amazing. Like, I love it. It's the thing I love most. I love to give back to people. I love to see some light come on for them or some new epiphany to be there. Like, that makes my entire day. And he's
That's
like,
such a great question.
and he said, okay, that's what you're stealing from people when you don't ask for help when you need it. And I was like,
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah. Yeah. I
right
love
in the
that.
heart.
Yeah. Warren is one of my favorite guests on this podcast, and it took years to get to him because he's like an enigma. Like it was like impossible to track him down. It's like he had a Facebook page you could message that he didn't even like respond to, and
Yeah,
eventually
he's
I found
old school.
some.
You gotta
Yeah.
drive to his compound in Tucson and just track him down.
I probably should have done that. It would have been faster to get him on the podcast, but I eventually did, and he's a brilliant guy. So that's great. Did I cut you off, or are you good there?
Yeah, 2 more just quick shout outs. I know you've interviewed Dave Parker before. He was our very first board member. He was our first what we call adult supervision that helped us in the early stages when we had no idea what we were doing and lacked a little confidence about it. And then Stephen Roche, who came on and helped support and mentor us from 2007 and has been a longtime shareholder of the business. He since went on to do amazing things. He ran the Walton family office for 5 years, and
Wow.
he was the president of Bill Gates Investments for 4 years. And
Wow.
yeah, you have
Directing
those
a lot of
relationships-
money.
Yeah, and it's really crazy when you see situations like that and you say, oh, that guy was helping us long before all these other really amazing people realized he was awesome. Like, how lucky are we
Yeah.
that we just kind of came across his path?
That's what I say when I hold up this picture of me with this unknown guy at
Oh,
the
yeah.
time. Yeah, that was from about 2010.
That's when he only had 3 kids.
Yeah, something like that. I think at that point. Yeah, I mean, my biggest regret is I didn't invite him on the podcast. I could have. I should have. I thought about it. I was just starting the podcast at the time, and I could have, and I didn't. And so I tell people all the time, like, that person that you're meeting now at some point in the future might be the world's richest man / craziest person. So you might as well like try and get some time with them,
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to learn more about you, Guidant, Doxa, and anything else you're involved in?
Yeah, Guidant's easy. It's guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant. Yeah, we did the branding when we were very new. Guidantfinancial.com. It's hard to spell. It's not Guidant. You can check me out on LinkedIn if you want to message me. I try to respond to all my messages from people, and I'm happy to be helpful wherever I can. And then I do have a podcast called Create the Life You Want. It's where I interview people that we've helped start businesses, and we just talk about their journey. And my hope with that podcast is we're just trying to get people's stories out there, like of real people, not necessarily the people that have become billionaires, but these real people who went from, like Spiro, who went from IBM to creating his own thing, because there's not only I think a connection you can make to real people who are doing it, but then hearing some of the strategies they use and some of the things they struggled with, I think can help people find strategies for how they can move forward if that's the thing that they're dreaming about.
Yeah, that's so cool. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, John.
Thanks Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.